So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end. Then, reading Yirmiyahu the prophet, the 61st chapter is always mentioned because Yirmiyahu the prophet was from a time where he was explaining then the spring feast, autumn feast, and the returning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. During this time then, where then the world is adjusting itself for the trade of the end. So let's make the situation very clear. The objective of Gentiles is simply lining up themselves with the decency and the moral practices of trade. Let's make it very clear, because there are morals of behavior and there are morals of trade. Behavior has no play in it, but behaving and then doing moral trade, those are extremely important, because the world is adjusting itself for the Ishmaelites as when they started with Ishmael. The restoration of then the trade of the world is directly related with the first son of Ibrahim. So then let's understand what this means. As then Daniel the prophet mentioned many times, he then regarded the layer of understanding of the restoration period. Daniel the prophet, he knew the creation, he knew the time where the world did not have laws. He did understand when the first laws came during the time of the experience of the desert. Then they went to the promised land, and then the Messiah came, and then the first 1,000 years came, then the other 1,000 years of Nahashatan is already spent. And then comes the restoration period, then subdivided in couple of transitional times. The first transitional time is then when the 1,000 years of deceit ends, where then people would go to and fro, and then the people of the Messiah would be mixed up with the world for a time. After 09, then we find the restoration period instantly taking place as per the instructions of the prophet, where then you find the first holy city on the land of Cush, and you find obviously the times and the seasons being respected. How do we know this? Because the times and the seasons is included on chapter 1:8. However, when you read the instructions, they are not properly numbered. The translators were ignorant. They did not understand that then the chapter 1:8 does not belong on chapter 1:8. There is a section of it related after the 61st. But then you have to understand the context and the content, so then you can layer those properly. But then, understandably, the world during this time, shortly 40 years after the ending of the time of deceit and the restoration period, we must then lock on the objective. It is moral trades practices. If you are a person regarding behavior, if you have any concerns with it, don't think of it. Make sure you understand first what Ishmael did. Proper moral trades behavior. Then you have a choice on your own to behave as moral, whatever you think normal is in your viewpoint, or otherwise. But as far as the trade's decency returns. So then, during this time where then China, the dragon, it is a precise term. It's not bad. Dragon is not bad. It is a precision time. time of precision. You have then what Daniel the prophet mentioned. Knowledge would increase for the purposes of trade. The only way you can do this is via computer, because then eliminates the middleman created and generated during the time of the deceit and far beyond. When you computerize trade in the system, then each transaction is tracked. This means scoundrels have no place in it. Thus then the cleaning during this time of the restoration period. The world has never gone through this time. This is the first time ever, as the world never experienced autumn feast. So we are each day living a new day. It's not an old day, or then what they used to know remains as it is. It's not. It is brand new. We are heading towards a brand new system of trade via computer worldwide. There are only exceptions regarding what Daniel has said in the 11th chapter. Then the kingdom of the north remains intact, government-wise. In any aspect you can think of, remains intact. However, then the governance of the northern kingdom has then a lineage from the Soviet time, but the practices of the new government is adopted from China. How they measure, how they do it, how they relate with it, it's up to the northern kingdom. The southern kingdom, however, is also an exception. How they're going to deal with it? Very simple. Mr. Zuma, unfortunately, he is turning to himself. He is then taking the money from the people, and then he's upgrading his own buildings, as if these leaders, they are joining together and scandalizing themselves. Lady Elizabeth gave herself a very huge pay increase during a time of crisis. Not very wise, because there is nothing going on in the UK. If you read then the news, there is not much going on up there. And then Australia is obviously adjusting themselves after the change of the government until elections. But then if you read and listen these politicians, there is nothing going on in Australia either. Let's make sure we understand. Mr. Tony some time ago and then Julia, they had a voting regarding preferences. It was 48 versus 52. So whatsoever change of government going on in Australia, it is yet 52%. In any level they can come up with other than carbon tax. That's the only thing going for them. Carbon tax. As if this would generate jobs, when it doesn't. It sucks money from industry. This is what it does. Yet these counts only for 52. The other 48% is with Tony yet. He has to come out of this whole swinging because he must protect what he has started. But there is a point though. China is searching for then the trading post of the South Pacific. They must make a decision. New Zealand has then obviously started with the convention center. Very wise. But then mixing up with casinos doesn't work. Because gambling, this kind of gambling mixed up, is part of the time of deceit. That's where then governments gamble with people's money. Perfect reason and perfect place is America. Watch what the government has done with the people's money. They have gambled away. But during this time where then the computer has taken over, each transaction is recorded. The expenses must be recorded. Every time there is a transaction, it is recorded. So then let's not make ourselves higher than we should, because as far as Australia, as far as we can understand and read and listen to these politicians, nothing has changed. Though the parliament has 52 versus 48 of Tony. Not much has changed. Lots of promises and, playing around with policies and, change this, change that, change the other. But what as far as truly generating jobs? There isn't. So let's not be hopeful regarding these new politicians, because they are not creating new jobs. There were some remarks of the Prime Minister that has taken over, as far as let's be more competitive, try and recuperate the industry or the Australian industry. Let me ask you this: can they go against the Chinese market? Absolutely never. It's a waste of time. So then, if a person takes a plan such as working in their own industry, they must understand what is important. For instance, smelting, rare metals, those are important. But what is even more important? Then we find on instructions. What has the Messiah said? Freighters of the earth. And then the freighters of the earth, he mentioned many times. What he's saying is this: except the northern, eastern, and southern kingdoms, freight is the most important. Why is he explaining of freighters rather than manufacturing? Because manufacturing is already taken over by China. They produce the most economical products. People can't compete. The reason why they can't compete is because the system, the computerized system, is coming very shortly. Yes, a country can invest in their own manufacturing, absolutely true. But this investment is going down. The reason why it's going down, because the system via computer makes the same product produced in your country with half or below half of the price, and you receive at your home via freight. Are you going to purchase a product twice the price in your country, where you can get the same product for half of it and delivered to your home? These are the questions that must be asked and answered, because when the system becomes available, then whatsoever then these leaders are trying to do with their industries is going to be at least cut in half. And the system is very strong. The reason why the Messiah then he lines up with Daniel, it's because Daniel was speaking the truth. He was a tradesperson explaining high knowledge from a time where then it would be initiating then the precision of the system. And since we are speaking of the restoration period spoken of by Yeshayahu the prophet, then we understand the restoration of the Gentiles, governance, and trade, and what it means then the northern, southern, and eastern kingdoms. Only those kingdoms are accepted. Those they can rule. Yet they are watching then the production. The rest, they must join up with the freighters. There are no other options. The reason why the Messiah spoke of freighters, because he was speaking of the average, the most important of the time. The Messiah, he knew there was a place where they would produce, there was a place with raw materials and where tabernacling was going to be at. And he did understand a military power of the time in order to protect those countries doing trade with the dragon. It's not a bad term. So then what is the obvious? The obvious is investing in a Dragon Mart. This is what is lacking. That's why Mexico very wisely in Cancun they are building the Dragon Mart. What can you expect of other countries? South Pacific, Dragon Mart. South Atlantic, Dragon Mart. And then South Africa, Dragon Mart. And then maybe Canada, Dragon Mart. So this truly is the initiation of the system starting with the BRICS. Then when the BRICS becomes then stronger and stronger and more people joining up, then the system later becomes available via computer, where then the manufacturing of every country then is at jeopardy. But it's not bad. Try to understand it's not bad because each individual becomes a company himself or herself. It depends on how much you invest. It depends what you do. So each individual person no longer in the future will be tied up with a central bank. They won't be tied up with rules of government. But they will understand the system of the dragon. So then, with this in mind, what can we expect from these? Obviously lining up with the dragon. It's not a bad term. Some people when they speak of dragon, it's evil, evil, evil. It's not evil. We are simply explaining a facet of Nahashatan related with precision. The evil is generated in your mind. Because Daniel did not say, and then evil of the time of the restoration. Does he? No. He speaks then later, in the 12th chapter, then the angel himself, via then Daniel, those who are filthy then remains filthy, and so on and so forth. Those times then are evil. But it's what you do with your earnings that categorizes you as evil or not. As far as the system is concerned, it's always there and available. But it's not a bad term. As far as Africa, the southern kingdom, obviously you can expect in South Africa another Dragon Mart. As they become then the Indian Ocean over there and also in the Pacific, the areas of Africa over there, the Atlantic rather, where they can do trade alongside the coast, and then obviously highways going from south to north, linking up the other countries. So as then also South Brazil, or then someplace in Brazil where then obviously another Dragon Mart. Because it's not only doing trade via ships, but at some point becomes online. The system is so englobing, it is so absolutely taken over, where then you have ships everywhere, because not only the regular manufacturing is being taken over, but then online trade is absolutely given to the dragon. There won't be any more independent sites if you want to earn money from. You have to admit, every time you make a purchase, you're going to find the least expensive and a nice quality, so then you can earn. If you buy in your regular store around the corner, you're not going to be earning as much. And not only this, as the governments, they are not preparing themselves, then the normal factor is raising taxes. And that's precisely what many countries are experiencing, because the retail in the computer is so vast and there is not enough taxes. When the system of the Dragon becomes available for downloading, then the countries, they have no way of taxing those products, because there is no direct link with the central bank and the system of China. It is virtual. They have to purchase the unit of one in a computer to use for themselves. Does you understand transfers? Are there laws then to control those transfers? No, there isn't. If you are familiar with Bitcoin, you understand it. There is no relation with the central bank, and the government can't control it. So the world is lining up with this new Dragon's system. You may not understand, you may not believe at the moment, because you were born during the time of deceit, from 1009 to 2009, and you have learned in a certain way. But then, the problem is, there is a virtual system coming where then you can receive, you can earn, you can invest via the same system. The world will change overnight. You can be absolutely certain of it. So then, let's make sure we understand and we are not mesmerized by new politicians, new groups of politicians trying to promise in many situations, many things. Promising these, then, they're going through, their catalogs and going through their own notes and trying to change and, shift around. They are not going to produce jobs. The only true market of production of jobs is by adopting the Dragon Mart. These truly produces lots of construction jobs, lots of contractors, and then the logistics involved because of the time of the end and the trade via computer is going to be absolutely phenomenal. You can combine then the logistics with it. You would be amazed, because not only there is a huge place for tourism, for obviously market, and then you find also the mixture of the freighters, ships coming from everywhere, then airports being then upgraded in order for them to receive those air parcels. But then they must know what's in the box. But using the Dragon's system, they don't know, because there is no link with the central bank. The only way of knowing it is by what then the label of the freighter states. Thus, taxation and freighting at the same time. That's why governments should line up with the freighters of their countries and then adopt their labeling system for the purposes of knowing what's in the parcels and taxing it. Otherwise, the government won't be able to tax it. They have to start making decisions, because the Central America is already taken. Cancun is the trading post of the Chinese, and then they are from the Dragon. And it's not a bad term. It is set for the time of the end. The situation is, where is then the South Pacific? Where is then the South Atlantic? Africa or Canada? They must adopt what the Mexicans are doing. They already have the blueprints. But not only these, has to go a step further. When these places then of the strategic areas of the world then they are taken, then becomes online. Then the entire computer system then is given to the dragon. Simply means precision. Then you find decency of trade. Trade is tracked. Then a trade where then countries can receive taxation if they are smart via these parcels, and people are using what they earn and they invest further. That's why China has vast stockpiles of raw materials. It's because they are going to start with a new system. And they have both already in place. They have the paper money and the virtual units. We don't understand because they are camouflaged on each other. When the time comes, people are going to be dealing as if they were dealing with Bitcoin. But then what backs it up is the production line. So some countries, when they read China is kind of introverting itself because they are trying to get themselves raw materials. They are stockpiling raw materials because they're going to start with the BRICS. Is the initiation of the system of the trade of the end. And there is then the second transitional time. Then the world after is then linked up, and then the entire internet based then is given to the dragon. Then the dragon gives then the stick of authority to the Ishmaelites via petroleum. Because then the entire world is linked up with a system of computer, and then the Ishmaelites, they have the fuel. Thus then the Ishmaelites receive their authority, and then they receive the stick of Ezekiel the 37th chapter. By then, tabernacling is very known, because the first city is on the land of Cush. Then there are the 7 cities of Asia Minor. Those must return. Lastly comes then Jerusalem. Only tabernacling of the desert is going to be on the top of the mountain. There is no temple. Temple does not exist. Then shortly after, then comes obviously the autumn feast. By then we are very close then to 2030, 2032. We must count yet the time of reduction. So there is not much time. We have roughly pushing for the very most 20 years the most. The Messiah was born in 4999 of the Creator's calendar, because when the world was created, it started with 1,000. As when you are born in the Holy Hebrew language, you are already a year old. So we are then, during a time, 7013. The Messiah was placed on a pole 5032. You count then 2,000 years from 5032 is 7032. Gives us not even 20 years, the very most. So during these 20 years, a lot of situations must be taking place. Time of the restoration period, then the first transition, then computerized systems, then the entire globalization of the system under the dragon's authority. Then it's given to the Ishmaelites. That's where then the second transition comes. Then during this time the cities are returning. And then at the very end comes then the combat of the end. So you've got maximum of 20 years. That's it. If you are a person that never heard this before and you think, those are only ideologies, then surely you have the wrong scripture. And some people say, nobody knows when the Messiah was born. Only because you are stupid. How could his people not know when the most important event of this planet would be taking place? Then the star had shone, then he was born. Mid-Tishri, or our equivalent of September of 4999, first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. So then what is obvious? The obvious part of it, absolutely short of it, is having the dragon market established. And then the blueprint is in Mexico. The unification of Mexico and China has given us then the origination from Ishmael. If you study the story or the history of Spain, you find then the Ishmaelites were there first. It's a starting point of the unification of the culture of Mexico with China, but then from Mexico comes the original trade from the Ishmaelites, serving as a model for the others. So the other countries of the world, other than speaking first with their freighters and making a deal with them, obviously is the implementation of the dragon market. So then when you understand later the second transition, when then the Ishmaelites are then in charge because of crude, then you will understand. By then, you have the entire global system under the dragon's authority. There is no exception. Every computer system doing trade in this planet must have the origination from the dragon. That's why the Messiah, then he explains in the 20th chapter of Revelation, he said then, and the serpent, and the devil, and Nahashatan, and then other names, and then dragon. What is the other word after the dragon? It is the destroyer. Started with a serpent. So each of them in a certain period of time during our history. So except for the governments of China, the Northern Kingdom, Soviet Union, and Africa, the Southern Kingdom, the rest of the world must adjust themselves with the freighters. And then they have the initiation of the new computerized system, because they must gather taxes via the freighters. Because when the new virtual system becomes available, then governments must gather their taxes from freighters. They can't do anymore the way they used to do. They don't have the authority of control anymore of the monetary system. It's under the dragon. The dragon controls it. Later then is given to the Ishmaelites. Let's hope we understand at least this much.